Hi there, my name is Peter Pitts. I am a partner and director of Porter Novelli's global healthcare practice. I'm also the president of the Center for Medicine and the Public Interest and a former FDA Associate Commissioner, and I blog every day at drugwonks.com. And boy, am I tired. I just came out of 2 days of FDA Part 15 hearings on social media, almost 72 presentations, and I'm not brain dead. It was very exciting. We talked about user-generated content. We talked about what a pharma company is or is not responsible for relative to websites that it controls or that it doesn't control. Of course, we talked about banner ads and the scary topic of sponsored Google links. Day one was largely put aside to discuss the issue of what is pharma responsible for on the internet and how can social media be used to not only sell product and advance corporate gains, but also to advance the public health. And it was very interesting. And I think that the people who served on the FDA panel were a little bit confused because the people who presented were a combination of pharma companies and advertising agencies and regulatory experts and just plain citizens. And the panel was confused, I think, because usually at all these FDA events, everybody who presents presents in object fear of the FDA. And there were plenty of people there, both yesterday and today, who realized the FDA is an important entity and gave them the respect that they were due, but certainly felt that they were equal to the task and probably knew a lot more about social media than the folks on the panel. And the panelists weren't used to being treated as equals. They were used to being treated almost as semi-regulatory gods. So in that respect, it was very new and different. It really was, in many respects, the Super Bowl of FDA events. It was clearly the most well-attended Part 15 hearing I've ever been to. It was held at the National Transportation Safety Board Conference Center down at L'Enfant Plaza. So I would say actually in the room were about 500 people for both days. Every seat was taken, and it was webcast. And from what I gather, many pharmaceutical companies and other regulated healthcare industries actually had rooms where they were watching this webcast. So it really was kind of the Oscars of an FDA event. And I was very honored to be able to present on day one. Fortunately, I was the fifth speaker, so most people were still paying attention and relatively crisp while I was speaking. Some of the things that came up that I think is very interesting was obviously the discussion of user-generated content. Because generally speaking, when you talk to the FDA, and certainly in conversations with pharmaceutical companies and other regulated industries, you're talking about what industry controls and how the FDA regulates that type of speech, whether it's labeling or promotional speech. One of the most interesting things that came up during the course of the 2 days at this FDA Part 15 hearing was the concept of user-generated content. The FDA is not used to thinking about content that it does not regulate under the FD&C Act. And clearly, user-generated content can't be considered labeling, and it can't be considered promotional advertising. It's user-generated content. It's de facto non-regulated because non-regulated entities are putting it forward. So what responsibilities do regulated entities have when they come across this user-generated content? Can they help to facilitate it? Can they pay for sites but then not post on it? And what if this user-generated content talks about off-label use? Or what if it discusses what could conceivably be considered adverse event issues? The FDA panelists were unclear, and the folks from the FDA who were listening were also very unclear because, again, they're used to talking and having people listen. This was a panel which was more interactive than any I've ever seen because the people were from ad agencies, they were social scientists, they were just regular consumers, and they weren't looking at the FDA in fear as their regulator. They were looking to them as part of their government for whom they pay taxes to support, and they want that government to do something to make things better. User-generated content kind of got the fluids flowing and emotions are pretty evident. And I think the FDA heard that message that they've got to think about it in terms other than regulator, but in terms of being a partner in advancing the public health. But one of the things that I found most interesting, this kind of came from the social science aspect of the social media folks who gave these presentations, was obviously that truth and transparency is very important, but that if you heavy up a communications mechanism, whether it's a Google link or a banner ad or a design website, if it's overly risk heavy, people just bounce right off of it. So the concept that more risk information is better doesn't play out, because if people bounce off of a website because of the immediacy of the risk information, that's not really accomplishing what we all want to accomplish. Anyway, all this to say that 20 hours and 74 presentations later, I'm pretty beat. I wanted to get this tape in before the weekend closed so we could post it on our website. But one important thing to remember is that this was a Part 15 hearing, and the joke in FDA circles is that the reason they're called Part 15 hearings is because it's generally about 15 minutes worth of interesting information. But this was really chock full of a lot of really cool, interesting, non-wonky FDA things. It was a very non-FDA type event, if you know what I mean. But the FDA isn't obligated to do anything. This was a listening session. They were receiving information, and obviously the docket for this Part 15 hearing remains open through the end of February, so there's time for all of us to get more information in there. In fact, for those of you who follow these things, regulations.gov measured that the FDA docket for social media was the #1 docket for the whole federal government for the last month, which is pretty astounding. So when I say it's the Super Bowl of FDA hearings, I was really serious. So at the end of the meeting, Tom Abrams, who's the director of DDMAC and was also the presiding officer at this Part 15 hearing, said, well, we got through it. But that's the wrong attitude, because there is a lot of work left to be done. And to Tom's credit, he said that he realizes that social media is too important not to get it done and not to do it right. Now, what does this mean? Does this mean that we're going to get a guidance in early 2011? Pardon me, maybe 2011, 2010? Probably not. I foresee that we'll get something towards the back end of 2010, maybe actually even bleeding into 2011. I plan actually to talk to the commissioner, Dr. Hamburg, and the deputy commissioner, Dr. Sharfstein, and explain to them that they can't let this wallow in people saying things like, we need more research, which is a common FDA statement when they're dealing with something difficult. The FDA really needs to do something, because social media exists, it's where the people are, and it's an important public health tool. My prediction for where the FDA is going on this is that they're going to go after the low-hanging fruit. And one piece of that low-hanging fruit is adverse event reporting. I think the FDA is going to clarify what regulated industry can and should do relative to websites that it does not control. Clearly, no one's saying that industry needs to monitor the entire internet. That's impossible. But industry needs to be incented to do the right thing, to be both in the business of selling product as well as being in the public health business. So low-hanging fruit #1 relative to a guidance is how to deal with adverse event reporting. And the second piece of low-hanging fruit that I think is also very important relative both to corporate needs and the public health is corrective information. Right now, companies are afraid even to correct information that they find that's wrong, because they fear that they would then be held responsible for all of the information on a website that might have this information on it. The FDA realizes this is a problem too. All responsible regulated entities need to be out there doing the best they can to make sure that social media has accurate, robust, and accessible information. I think the FDA heard that. This hearing was valuable. Please let us know at Porter Novelli anything that we can do to help you out. We have good relationships. This is going to have implications abroad as well, and not just for paid marketing on social media, but for the more organic public relations directed work that we can do to help influence the folks who are using social media on a regular basis to enhance their health and those that they love. So thanks a lot, and thanks for listening.